So these two phones get a lot of comparisons, and on paper I don't actually feel like they make much sense to be compared with each other. Hey guys, my name is Ryan Thomas with Failtech, and this is the OnePlus 5T versus the LG G6 in 2018 and beyond. Let's first talk about software, because I feel this is where the main differences are. Okay, so with the LG G6 you're on 7.0 on a fairly heavily skinned version of Android. This means that you're going to get different kinds of menus and they look different, and the layout is generally not going to be the same as something like a Nexus or a OnePlus device or even a Samsung device. Now this can lead to many good things, including more accessibility options and options that further customize the phone, specifically that model. However, it is difficult to kind of work across, so say you've got an old parent or someone who's a lot younger who might find it a bit difficult to go from one OS to the next or from one phone to the next. It can be a bit difficult, and secondly, it means that the manufacturer actually has to develop software specifically for that phone, meaning that the G6 is still on 7.0, which is absolutely ludicrous unless you load up your custom ROM of choice. Whereas the OnePlus 5T uses something called Oxygen OS, which is a very light, very mildly skinned version of Android 8.1 Oreo, which is amazing. It's up to date, it's fluid, it's fast, and it's not so far from stock. You get some customization options which are really nice and enable some more fluidity throughout the OS. It's also closer to stock, meaning that it's easier to kind of get around if you're moving from, say, a Pixel or an older Nexus device. And the overall experience, I feel, is a lot cleaner, smoother, and easier to customize. If I had to give an award for each category, software would definitely go to the OnePlus 5T. Next, let's talk about hardware, because these phones are like chalk and cheese. We've got a glass sandwich design on the LG G6, and we've got a metal aluminium housing on the OnePlus 5T. Now personally, I prefer the G6. However, on paper, the G6 wins out with its mil-spec rating and IP rating, and the OnePlus 5T has some weird online forums saying that it's rated for IP67, but not officially. It hasn't got the certificate or anything like that. However, I believe that the design and build materials are kind of subjective, but I prefer the glass sandwich look of the LG G6. It just looks incredibly classy, one of the nicest phones to feel in the hand ever. I absolutely love it, and I feel like the ergonomics are better because it seems to be more grippy with kind of chunkier rails than the OnePlus 5T, which is arguably a very slippery phone due to its slippery aluminium back. The fingerprint scanners are both very fast, unfortunately a lot faster on the OnePlus 5T, and are located in similar spots. Both use software nav buttons as opposed to hardware ones, and in general it's a very similar layout. That's pretty much the hardware in a nutshell. I'm going to have to give the slight edge to the 5T just due to the fact that it's harder to crack because it hasn't got a glass back. However, I personally prefer the G6. What about cameras? Well, in my opinion, the 5T is light years ahead, and I'll talk about that in my main review of the device, which is coming up in the next week or two. However, I feel like the OnePlus 5T just does a really good job with software. Now, it hasn't got a telephoto or a wide-angle lens, so immediately you're losing out on functionality compared to the G6, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the 5T comes with this secondary camera, which is meant to be good at low light. However, they're smaller pixels, and it doesn't really make much sense to me. However, it does churn out some pretty good photos in whatever lighting. I really like the portrait mode. I feel like that works really well here, and I really like the photos. 16 megapixels, really wide glass. The overall experience of taking the photos is really good in the stock camera app. The one thing that isn't so good is, like I said, it does have dual cameras, but it doesn't have two different types of focal length, which is something that G6 has with its dual 13 megapixel sensors. One is a standard focal range, and the second is a super wide focal range, which is really fun to play with, don't get me wrong. However, the dynamic range does fall short, and the overall look of the photos, in my opinion, just isn't as good as the OnePlus 5T. Now, I think this is due to software alone, and I believe this is where LG really lacks in pretty much every one of their phones. I mean, they're a multi-billion-dollar company. How they can't kind of use more people to look into the software side of things when you've got OnePlus, who are arguably a lot smaller company, have much better software. I don't know why LG don't do that, because a lot of people are straying away from LG devices. Bit of a rant over there, but you see what I mean. The software just isn't so good on the LG device. If we're looking at this from a pure functionality perspective, I feel like the G6 is better. However, if we're looking at quality of photos, videos, and the experience of taking those photos and videos, I feel like the 5T just absolutely smashes it. The displays are a little bit awkward and a bit harder to compare just due to the fact that they're using two different panel types and two different resolutions. So first, let's talk about resolution. The 5T uses a wide 1080p standard, which utilizes less of the battery, meaning that you get better battery performance. However, it's not as sharp as the G6, which has a QHD or wide QHD display. So overall, the resolution is going to be a lot better on the G6. However, it is going to take more of a hit on the battery. Then we move over to panel types, and you get an IPS display on the G6, which is better for viewing angles, and you'll get more natural colors. However, it's not going to be as bright in broad daylight, and you aren't going to get deeper blacks or punchy colors, which is what you get with the OnePlus 5T, which is using an AMOLED display. The AMOLED display leads to much nicer colours in my opinion, although they're not quite as accurate and the viewing angles aren't quite as good, but it's just more punchy and fun to look at. However, it's not sharp, so it's really down to what you prefer. I prefer the OnePlus 5T's display, but a lot of people might prefer the G6's display. It's hard to give a clear winner here. When it comes to performance, the 5T, as you can tell, you already knew before clicking on this video, wipes the floor with the G6. The Snapdragon 835, coupled with that light software, give it a clear edge over the 821 and the heavy kind of skin on Android 7.0 on, of course, the G6. Don't get me wrong, the G6 is fast, it's going to play modern 3D titles, everything like that. However, it's not going to be as good as the 835 in the OnePlus 5T, which also has 6 to 8 gigabytes of RAM versus the 4 to 6 gigabytes of RAM on the G6. Now, there's one thing that makes a huge difference here to me, and that is that the OnePlus 5T does not have Microsd Expansion, where the G6 does. Now, this is important to me because I like to listen to music. I like to not have to load my music onto every phone. I like to just transfer it over Microsd. However, lots of you might actually just prefer to have better onboard storage, but I personally really like Microsd Expansion, so I'm going to have to give a +1 to the LG G6 here. What about battery life? Well, both are rocking 3300 mAh batteries, which could lead you to believe that their battery lives are the same, but they're absolutely not. Not only is the OnePlus 5T's software more refined, but it's also got a lower resolution display, so it doesn't have to power so much, and the CPU is a lot newer, meaning that it doesn't have to drive so much power to it because it's more power efficient. And overall, it leads to the battery life on the OnePlus 5T being a day to a day and a half, versus 3/4 to a day on the LG G6. I believe this isn't helped by the really high resolution display, but it's something to talk about and it's something to watch out for. You might be able to get a ROM that can lead the battery life to a higher standard, and in my opinion, neither really should have such a small battery. I believe like 3,800 and 4,000 mAh should be absolutely standard in phones of this size. However, there are a lot of people that disagree with me on that one. So I'm going to have to give the battery life win to the OnePlus 5T. Now, there's one thing that I've missed out in this little comparison, and that is the price. Now, I don't know where you live, but I'm talking about the UK here. In the UK, you can buy a G6 for a lot less money than the OnePlus 5T. The 5T comes in at around £450 to £500, and the LG G6 comes in at around £275 to £300. Now that is 50% less money, which is ridiculous and means I should hardly be comparing these phones, and that's kind of what I was alluding to at the start of this video. If I had to pick one, it's going to be the G6 every day of the week. Now you may be thinking, right, you've just told us that the 5T is better in pretty much every category, and whilst that is true and I stand by that claim, it's so much cheaper that the G6 is just worth it. It's a steal compared to the OnePlus 5T. Now of course it's not going to last you as long and you're not going to have as many features, it's not going to be as clean, but I'd personally try and stick custom software on there because I could really make that last a while. I don't think you can go wrong with either, and I really feel like both are really solid options. However, if you're not on a budget and you don't have to worry, go for the 5T. Every single day it's going to be better, it's going to be more fun to use, it's going to last longer, it's going to be faster, quicker, and it's going to last longer in longevity as well as battery life. However, the G6, if you're on a tight budget, is a really solid phone. Like seriously, it's military graded or something like that. Anyway guys, that's my verdict. Hopefully you really enjoyed this video. Please do leave a like, dislike, comment, subscribe if you're new around here to never miss a video like this one. I want to thank HasTechGamer, Darren and Ross for supporting me on Patreon, and please do go and follow me on social media. It helps me out and hopefully you can start a conversation over there with me as well. Anyway guys, my name is Ryan Thomas for Failtech. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.